YAW Mensah had always been a romantic at heart. Growing up in a close-knit family in Ghana, he had heard tales of love that transcended distance and circumstance. His parents often shared stories of how they met and fell in love, and YAW dreamt of a similar story of his own. When he moved to the UK for work, he expected to encounter many challenges, but finding love was not one of them. One day, while scrolling through social media, YAW stumbled upon the profile of Abina Aguiman, a stunning young woman from Ghana. Her photos radiated warmth and beauty, and her posts reflected a vibrant personality. Captivated, YAW sent her a friend request and was thrilled when she accepted. Their initial conversations were lighthearted and playful, and soon they were messaging daily. YAW found himself drawn to her charm and laughter, and a budding romance began to blossom. Excitedly, he confided in his best friend, Akwasi, about the connection he had made. "Akwasi, you won't believe it. I've met someone really special," YAW exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. Akwasi, ever the cautious friend, raised an eyebrow. "That's great, YAW, but take your time. You've never even met her in person. Make sure she's really who she says she is before you get too serious." YAW waved off Akwasi's concerns. "I know, but I can't help it. I feel like I've known her forever. She's perfect for me." As the days turned into weeks, YAW couldn't shake his feelings for Abina. He printed her photos and hung them around his room, creating a shrine to their digital romance. His roommates were supportive and celebrated his infatuation, but Akwasi remained skeptical, urging YAW to be cautious. "I'll go to Ghana soon," YAW declared one day, "and I'm going to marry her." Akwasi sighed, "Just make sure to get to know her better first." "It's a big decision, YAW." Despite the warnings, YAW felt certain of his choice. After a few months of intense online communication, he sent money back home to his family to begin preparations for the wedding. They were ecstatic, celebrating YAW's love story and embracing the upcoming union with joy and excitement. He shared Abina's photos with them, and they all praised her beauty and charm, reinforcing YAW's infatuation. As the wedding day approached, YAW's family traveled to Abina's village to present the traditional items required for the marriage. They had followed all the customs, and YAW felt a surge of pride as he envisioned his future with Abina. The day arrived for them to meet Abina in person, and excitement filled the air. When Abina entered the room, however, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. YAW's mother, Mame Asidu, took one look at the woman standing before her and felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. The woman who appeared was not the same as the one in the pictures YAW had shared. Confusion and concern spread among YAW's family, and whispers began to circulate. "Is this really Abina?" Mame Asidu asked YAW's uncle quietly, pulling out her phone to compare the photos. "It can't be. She looks so different," his uncle replied, equally bewildered. Excusing themselves from the gathering, Mame Asidu and YAW's uncle stepped outside to call YAW. The news they delivered was devastating. "YAW, we need to talk. The woman here, she doesn't look like the Abina from the pictures. Something is wrong." Stunned, YAW couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. "What do you mean? Are you sure?" "Yes, it's true. You need to see for yourself." Fearing the worst, YAW immediately tried to reach Abina via video call. She didn't answer, and frustration bubbled within him. After several attempts, she finally picked up, and YAW confronted her, hurt and angry. "Why didn't you tell me? Why are you different from your pictures?" Abina struggled to provide a satisfactory explanation, leaving YAW feeling more betrayed than ever. Back in Ghana, Mame Asidu urged her son to proceed with the wedding, emphasizing that they couldn't cancel after making such substantial preparations. "Think of the shame it would bring to both families," she insisted. Despite his anger, YAW felt pressured to comply. With a heavy heart, he agreed to continue with the traditional wedding ceremony, hoping that he could somehow reconcile his feelings later. Months passed, and YAW returned to Ghana to start a new life with Abina. He had ended his contract in the UK, eager to build a future together. However, upon his arrival, YAW found himself filled with unease. The excitement that had once consumed him had faded, replaced by confusion and dissatisfaction. For 3 weeks, he and Abina had not been intimate, and the emotional distance between them only seemed to widen. Desperate for guidance, YAW reached out to Akwasi, who had also returned to Ghana. "Man, I'm struggling," YAW admitted. "I thought everything would be perfect, but it's not like I imagined." Akwasi listened patiently before offering his advice. "You need to take it slow, YAW. You can't force love. Give it time and be patient with her. You might find that you grow to love her in your own way." Taking Akwasi's words to heart, YAW tried to foster a more loving environment at home. He made an effort to compliment Abina, engaging her in conversations about her life, her interests, and her children. But no matter how hard he tried, Abina often seemed disengaged, preferring to talk about her past or the movies she watched rather than their relationship. Feeling increasingly isolated, YAW grew frustrated. One fateful night, he returned home late, around 11 p.m., only to find that the door to their room was locked. He knocked and called out to Abina, but she didn't respond. After a futile hour, he gave up and sought refuge at an all-night church, trying to find solace in prayer. The next morning, he confronted Abina about her lack of response. "Why didn't you open the door? I was worried." "I didn't hear you," she replied nonchalantly, shrugging off his concern. This pattern continued for over a year. YAW felt more like a stranger in his own home, and the weight of his loneliness became unbearable. He craved intimacy, affection, and emotional connection, but Abina seemed indifferent to his needs. In a moment of desperation, YAW sought comfort outside his marriage. He began speaking to a woman named Fuwa, hoping to find the happiness and love that seemed elusive with Abina. Their conversations filled a void, and for the first time in a long while, YAW felt alive again. But fate had other plans. One day, while going through YAW's phone, Abina discovered the chats between him and Fuwa. Furious, she called Fuwa and issued a warning never to contact her husband again. The ensuing confrontation caused a rift between YAW and Abina, leaving him feeling regretful for his actions. He had hoped that Fuwa would inspire him to rekindle his feelings for Abina, but now the situation had spiraled out of control. "I'm sorry," YAW said to Abina, feeling the weight of his choices. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to feel loved again." Abina's reaction surprised him. "If you want to marry a second wife, I won't stop you. Just don't hide it from me," she said, her tone surprisingly calm. Though initially taken aback, YAW appreciated her honesty. "But I want someone who can bring joy into our lives," Abina added, expressing her desire for him to find a better match. The agreement was strange but liberating for YAW. He ended things with Fuwa, recognizing that he needed to focus on his relationship with Abina.
The day of the traditional engagement ceremony arrived, and YAW's family made the long journey to Abina's family home, carrying traditional items for the ceremony. When they arrived, Abina's father warmly welcomed them, and the atmosphere was filled with celebration and joy. But then, something unusual happened. Mame Asedu, YAW's mother, couldn't shake a feeling of discomfort. As Abina entered the room, Mame Asedu's heart skipped a beat. She discreetly pulled out her phone, scrolling through the photos her son had sent. Her stomach dropped as she compared the photo to the woman standing before her. This woman, though polite and well-dressed, did not look like the Abina from the pictures YAW had sent. Confused and unsettled, Mame Asedu excused herself and spoke quietly to YAW's uncle. They stepped outside and, with shaking hands, dialed YAW's number. He answered eagerly, his voice filled with anticipation. But Mame Asedu's tone was grave as she relayed the shocking news. "YAW," she said carefully, "this woman. She isn't the same one in the picture." YAW's heart dropped. He listened in disbelief, questions flooding his mind. He couldn't imagine why Abina would deceive him like this. Desperate for answers, he called her on video, but she didn't answer. His heart pounded, and his stomach twisted with dread. What else could she be hiding? As YAW's family debated what to do, a few members suggested cancelling the wedding. But Mame Asedu, torn between anger and compassion, refused. She didn't want to bring shame upon either family, especially since they had already brought all the traditional items. YAW, struggling with disappointment and anger, reluctantly agreed to let the ceremony proceed. The woman he had dreamed of was not who she seemed, but his mother's insistence kept him from backing out. The ceremony concluded, but YAW felt numb. His mind was racing, his heart breaking, and all his dreams felt shattered. He watched from afar, his sense of betrayal consuming him. The love he had imagined now felt hollow, like an illusion that had evaporated into thin air. Months later, YAW returned to Ghana, his heart heavy with unresolved feelings. Seeing Abina in person felt surreal. She was now his wife, but the warmth he once felt was absent. For 3 weeks, he found it impossible to connect with her intimately. Abina, sensing his distance, grew anxious, but their conversations were stilted, filled with silences and missed connections. YAW sought solace in his friend Akwasi, who urged him to make the best of his marriage and try to find love for Abina. Love grows, Akwasi assured him, if you give it a chance. With Akwasi's encouragement, YAW made an effort to bridge the gap. He tried to be affectionate, to spark a connection, but Abina seemed preoccupied with her past life and her children. Each attempt left him feeling more isolated, as though he was reaching for something that wasn't there. After years of struggle, YAW felt emotionally drained. He still yearned for the love and connection he had dreamed of but had been unable to find in his marriage. Then, one day, he met Serwa, a warm, genuine woman who brought a sense of lightness back into his life. Talking with her felt natural and effortless, a stark contrast to the guarded conversations he shared with Abina. When he finally gathered the courage to tell Abina about Serwa, she surprised him by responding calmly. "If you want a second wife, I won't stand in your way," she said, her voice carrying a strange mixture of resignation and relief. However, she insisted that he be transparent with her about everything. For the first time in years, YAW felt a glimmer of hope. With Serwa by his side, he felt that he could start afresh, embracing the lessons he'd learned from his painful journey. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he wanted honesty, connection, and a chance at true happiness. Despite their efforts to bridge the emotional distance between them, YAW and Abina continued to drift apart. YAW's attempts to bring warmth and affection to their marriage seemed to slip through his fingers, and Abina's focus remained steadfast on her past. She often spoke of her children and memories that didn't include him, and YAW felt like a guest in his own home, an outsider in Abina's carefully guarded world. After much soul-searching, YAW made a decision that felt inevitable. He would seek a second wife. He wanted the companionship, trust, and warmth he had dreamed of when he first considered marriage. This choice felt like both a fresh beginning and a painful admission that he and Abina might never truly connect. Abina was heartbroken when he told her, rejecting the idea outright. The pain of her earlier deception seemed to echo, a reminder of the secrets that had come between them. YAW was disappointed but resolute, knowing his heart yearned for a complete, authentic connection. Over the following months, Abina watched as YAW grew closer to another woman, Serwa, the same woman who had been a bright spot in his life before. It was painful for Abina to accept, her pride and heartbreak intertwining as she faced the reality of their marriage. Yet, she couldn't deny that YAW seemed happier than he had been in years. She could see it in the way his face lit up around Serwa, and in the care with which he treated both women with respect and honesty. At first, Abina resisted every mention of Serwa, refusing to speak about her, let alone meet her. But over time, she began to see YAW's genuine happiness and softened her stance, though her acceptance was slow and filled with difficult emotions. She began to find her own peace by focusing on her role as a mother and on the parts of her life that brought her meaning. Gradually, she realized that YAW's love for Serwa didn't diminish his respect for her, even if their marriage had not fulfilled either of their dreams. Abina could feel it, a subtle shift in YAW's demeanor that gnawed at her like a silent thorn. Once, he had been completely hers, and they'd spent countless days building a life, comforting each other through struggles and joys. But recently, he had seemed distracted, preoccupied, as if something, or someone, was slipping between them. That was when she heard rumors. YAW was considering a second wife. At first, Abina didn't want to believe it. Their culture permitted men to marry more than once, yes, but she had never imagined that YAW, her beloved husband, would actually act on that option. She remembered the early days of their marriage, days when they had barely enough to eat, when they'd worked together to make ends meet. Her love and commitment had been steadfast. And now, she felt betrayed. One evening, unable to contain her fears, she broached the topic. "YAW, I've been hearing things," she said, her voice shaking. "People are saying you're planning to marry again." YAW looked at her, a little taken aback. "Abina, you know I love you," he started, but his words didn't comfort her. Instead, they only fueled her suspicion. "Then why would you bring another woman into our lives?" She shot back, her voice rising. "Haven't I been good enough for you? Haven't we built this life together, just the two of us?" YAW sighed. "It's not about you, Abina. It's not about what you've done or haven't done. There are expectations, pressures. And I feel that it might be right for me. You know our traditions." Abina clenched her fists. She couldn't bear the thought of another woman sharing her husband. "You talk about tradition, YAW, but what about us? What about our family? You know how much your mother is struggling. You told me just last week how your siblings can barely afford to pay for school. If you bring another wife into our lives, how will you support her? Have you even thought about the financial strain?" Her words hit a nerve. YAW's face hardened. "Abina, don't try to manipulate me with my family's troubles," he warned. "I have thought about it. But don't try to make me feel guilty for wanting this." But Abina couldn't stop. Her jealousy was like a rising tide, pulling her deeper.
YAW and Abina had been through countless conversations that tiptoed around sensitive topics. But today, Abina was determined to address the weighty subject she'd avoided for too long. Sitting across from YAW in the dimly lit living room, she folded her hands, carefully choosing her words. "YAW, we need to talk about your family's financial situation. It's affecting everything. We can't keep pretending it doesn't exist." YAW's face hardened, his fingers tapping restlessly against his knee. "What's there to discuss, Abina? You know how things are. It's my responsibility, and I'm handling it." "But it's not just about money, YAW," Abina said gently. "You're distant, unhappy. There are so many things we don't share anymore. I feel like you're somewhere else." Her words cut through the silence, and YAW's gaze grew icy. He leaned back, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Maybe I'm somewhere else because you're too busy with your own image to notice what I actually need." Confused, Abina frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your social media, Abina," YAW's voice rose, his anger bubbling to the surface. "You've turned yourself into someone else. You want everyone to think everything's perfect, and you're obsessed with that image. But where does that leave us?" Abina opened her mouth to respond, but YAW continued, his frustration spilling out in a rush. "That's exactly why I'm considering taking a second wife. It's not even about you. It's about the fact that I need something you can't give me anymore." Abina's face fell, her eyes wide with shock. What are you saying?" YAW's voice softened but remained resolute. "I don't love you the way I thought I would, Abina. I don't know if I even can. I've tried, but you've changed. Or maybe we both have." His words sank deep, shattering any illusions Abina had held onto. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating, as both struggled to process what had just been said. Months passed, and the distance between YAW and Abina only grew. The pain of that argument lingered, echoing in Abina's mind every time she saw YAW. But she held her head high, trying to focus on her own life, her own goals, hoping that time would heal the wounds. Then, one day, Abina heard whispers from mutual friends, murmurs about YAW's recent behavior. Rumors that he'd ended his affair with Surwa and found someone else, a new woman named Essie. Essie was younger, vibrant, and seemingly everything YAW had been yearning for. The rumors were confirmed when Abina saw YAW and SC together in town, laughing and exchanging glances that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Her heart twisted painfully, feeling betrayed and humiliated all over again. But the worst was yet to come. Weeks later, she learned that SC was pregnant. The news sent shockwaves through both YAW's family and Abina's, igniting a chain reaction of tension and hurt. YAW's decision had not only shattered Abina but had disrupted the delicate balance of respect and unity between their families. ESI's pregnancy stirred deep concerns in her parents. They were proud, traditional people who valued their daughter's future, and they worried that she'd been drawn into something that would only bring hardship. Tensions simmered as ESI's parents, feeling protective of their daughter, sought to confront YAW and his family. The first confrontation happened when ESI's parents visited YAW's family home. The atmosphere was tense, with both families exchanging guarded pleasantries as they took their seats. YAW, ESI's father began, his voice calm but laced with frustration. "You've involved our daughter in something that affects more than just you. You've put her in the middle of a complicated situation." YAW's father shifted uncomfortably, while his mother's face remained stern. "We understand your concern, but YAW's intentions are clear. He cares deeply for SC. But he's married." ESI's mother interjected, her voice trembling. "How will our daughter live, constantly caught between your family and his wife? This is no life for her." Abina sat silently, her face an unreadable mask as the argument continued around her. She'd already felt the deep sting of betrayal, but hearing ESI's family voice their frustrations brought a fresh wave of pain. YAW, caught in the middle, looked torn. He'd been so consumed by his own desires, his own need for something different, that he hadn't considered the chaos his decisions would create. Now, standing before both families, he felt the weight of his choices bearing down on him. Unable to bear the tension, ESI's father rose to his feet, his voice rising. "If this is how things will be, then we have nothing more to discuss. We will take SC home, and you can figure out the consequences of your actions without her." With that, he took SC by the arm, guiding her out of the room. Abina watched them go, her heart heavy, realizing that the damage YAW had caused would take much more than time to repair.
Abina sat quietly, her heart sinking as ESI's father took her hand and guided her out of the room. The tension hung heavily, the kind that even silence couldn't soften. Abina watched ESI's retreating figure, a hollow feeling taking root inside her. In that moment, she felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, frustration, and a deep, gnawing sadness. For months, she had wondered if things might somehow resolve, if YAW's decisions wouldn't leave such scars. But seeing ESI's family storm out, she realized that the damage YAW had caused was beyond repair. YAW was quiet too, watching his parents as they exchanged tense, angry whispers about the mess he had created. He glanced at Abina, whose face was stoic, but he could sense the sorrow and disappointment emanating from her. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. As the days passed, the fallout from ESI's family's confrontation only grew. YAW's parents were displeased, seeing their son's reputation tainted, their family pulled into unwanted scandal. Abina, though outwardly calm, was plagued by hurt and betrayal, silently watching as YAW seemed to drift further from her, bound now to both her and SC through tangled emotions and responsibilities. And SC, heartbroken and carrying YAW's child, was left grappling with her own turmoil. Months later, SC gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. News of the baby's arrival spread quickly, and the families gathered reluctantly at the hospital. YAW's heart swelled with pride as he held his newborn daughter, admiring her small features and feeling a fleeting moment of hope for the future. But this hope was fleeting, overshadowed by the mounting challenges waiting for him back home. ESI's father was there, but he kept his distance. As much as he cherished his granddaughter, he couldn't bring himself to fully forgive YAW. He had learned of YAW's past, including the child he had fathered with another woman before Abina. That knowledge weighed heavily on him. He didn't want his daughter tied to a man with such a tangled history. To him, YAW's actions showed a pattern of irresponsibility, and he wasn't about to let his daughter be another in a string of casualties. The tension in the hospital room was palpable. YAW's parents attempted to congratulate ESI's family, but every exchange was met with polite nods and tight-lipped smiles. Abina stayed silent, her face a blank mask. She had agreed to come, but only out of a sense of duty. She felt as if she were an outsider watching a drama she couldn't escape from. As weeks turned into months, YAW's situation began to unravel even further. His work, once steady, had taken a sudden downturn. Contracts that he'd relied on fell through, and clients began drifting away. The financial strain hit hard, not only affecting him but his entire family. Every conversation with his parents became an argument about money, and his relationship with Abina grew colder as his frustrations mounted. YAW found himself staying out late, avoiding the realities waiting for him at home. He often spent nights wandering the city, alone with his thoughts, searching for an answer he couldn't seem to find. His mind kept returning to the idea of starting over, far away from the mess he had made of his life. Friends had told him about Europe, about the opportunities there, the fresh start it promised. The idea became an obsession, a hope that grew stronger each time he faced the cold stares from Abina or the silence of ESI's father. Europe, he thought, would be his escape, his chance to prove to himself and everyone else that he could build a better life. But leaving wasn't simple. Traveling to Europe required money he didn't have. His savings had already been stretched thin supporting 2 families, and his work was unreliable at best. Desperate, YAW began seeking help from old friends, hoping to borrow enough to make his dream of escape a reality. YAW started reaching out to friends, some he hadn't spoken to in years. He swallowed his pride, crafting careful messages and rehearsing his requests, knowing that he needed all the help he could get. Each conversation brought mixed reactions. Some friends sympathized with his plight, while others turned him away, skeptical of his intentions. One night, he met with Kofi, an old friend who had known him since childhood. They met at a small cafe, and after a few pleasantries, YAW laid out his situation, explaining his financial troubles and his desire to go abroad. Kofi listened patiently, his expression unreadable. "YAW, I understand why you want to leave," he finally said, "but I have to ask. Are you doing this to escape your responsibilities?" YAW clenched his jaw, fighting the surge of defensiveness rising within him. "It's not about escaping," he said, his voice tense. "It's about starting fresh, finding a way to support my family properly." Kofi nodded, still looking unconvinced. "I'll help you with what I can," he said, "but remember, you can't run from the past. It'll follow you wherever you go." YAW thanked him, grateful for the assistance, but Kofi's words lingered, casting doubt over his plans. The question gnawed at him. Was he truly seeking a new life, or was he trying to run away from the mess he'd created? Despite the support he received from Kofi, it wasn't enough to fund his trip. YAW continued reaching out, his desperation growing with each rejection. Some friends expressed regret but explained that they couldn't risk their own finances. Others bluntly told him they didn't trust him with such a large sum, citing his past mistakes and failed commitments. As YAW struggled to gather the money, tensions between the families only grew. ESI's parents remained resolute in their disapproval, making it clear that they did not consider YAW a suitable partner for their daughter. As she herself was torn, caught between loyalty to her family and the complicated feelings she still harbored for YAW. She had hoped that having a child together might bridge the gap between them, but instead, it had only intensified the strain. Abina, too, was affected by YAW's turmoil. Though they shared a home, they lived as strangers, exchanging only brief, hollow conversations. She felt trapped in a life that no longer resembled the dreams they had once shared. Watching YAW drift further into his plans to leave, she realized that the man she'd loved was no longer the man beside her. In the background, the financial strain worsened. Bills piled up, and YAW's parents grew increasingly worried, knowing that their own stability was at risk. They urged him to reconsider his plans to leave, fearing that his absence would leave them unsupported. But YAW's determination was unshakable. He couldn't face the life he'd built for himself here, not with the shattered relationships and the constant reminders of his failures. Europe, in his mind, had become his last chance. As the day of his planned departure drew near, YAW finally gathered enough money through small loans and favors, though it was a precarious amount. He knew that leaving wasn't a guaranteed success, but he had convinced himself that anything would be better than the life he was leaving behind. The night before he left, he called Abina into the living room, hoping to offer her some form of explanation, even though he doubted she would understand. She stood there, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I know you don't want to hear this," YAW began, his voice rough with emotion, "but I have to go, Abina. I can't keep living like this." Abina met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "Do what you want, YAW," she said softly. "You always have." Her words stung, but he knew they were true. She turned and walked away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. For a moment, he wondered if he was making a mistake, if staying and facing his responsibilities was the path he should take. But that thought faded quickly, replaced by the yearning for a new beginning. In the early hours of the morning, YAW left without fanfare, without goodbyes. He carried with him only a small bag and a heart heavy with the weight of his choices. He boarded the bus that would take him to the airport, feeling a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. As the city he had known all his life faded behind him, YAW allowed himself a brief moment of hope, imagining the life he would build in Europe, far from the tangled relationships and unfulfilled promises he had left behind. But even as he looked ahead, he couldn't shake the feeling that the past would follow him, that the choices he had made would find him no matter where he went.